I'd like to call a meeting of the Orleans Water Quality Advisory Panel for December 3rd, 2014 to order. Stacy.
Would you like to see if people are ready to approve the October 22nd?
I would. I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes of October 22nd.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Support.
Changes or further amendments? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They're approved unanimously. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Wow, we've made it to December. So, agenda for today, we are really looking at some of the technical issues that we still need to look at to feed us into our next meeting, where we're going to really start exploring a hybrid starting point plan. So we're going to talk about septic and wastewater management options for Tri-Town. And as you all know, Tri-Town is a big piece of this puzzle. So there's some work being done on it in a separate track, but it needs to feed into this because it's clearly dependent on what this panel wants to do for water quality going forward. And then we're also going to take some time and we'll talk about different collection systems as well and the alternatives around that. And what I really want to do is help move us away from sort of positional ideas of this system, this system, this system, and get a little deeper into what do we really care about? What are we trying to achieve? Right? What are these systems trying to do for us? And what's the flexibility of these different options and alternatives for meeting our underlying interests and needs for the system? So that's really what we're going to try and do as we talk about these collection systems. And then after our break, we're going to talk about permeable reactive barriers. There was a request to get a little bit more into that topic, better understand what do we know about them, what don't we know, what's working, what's not, what are questions that are outstanding. So we're going to pick that up and then hopefully have a little bit of time to talk about the December 17th meeting. We have a request for you to hold a little bit longer time period. So for the potential that we might go later into the afternoon, which would involve us bringing in some lunch. And we don't quite know exactly yet how much time we might need, but we want to reserve more time, both from the room and also from all of you, so that we make sure that we really will have the time that we need to go through this initial option and get people's reactions enough that we're ready to do more work and bring it back to you for the next meeting. So we'll talk more about that as we get to that part on the agenda. Any questions about the agenda? Okay. I apologize that I didn't get a meeting reminder and a link to all the materials out to everybody who's not at the panel in advance of this meeting. I just got flustered by the holiday and trying to get everything done before and just forgot to send it to you all, so my apologies. The materials were all there on the website, so if you don't get my email, check the website, and at least hopefully it's all there. So, ground rules, again, be respectful, be concise, be on task, be constructive, and be participatory. So just a reminder of all of those. We've been doing a pretty good job at that. I think what we're going to do for this meeting is try to start with keeping the discussion at the table. So I know in the past we've done a little bit of both, but there's been some requests that just for efficiency's sake, we haven't really been making it through our agenda as efficiently as we have hoped in the past few meetings. So we are going to try and keep comments at the table for today and hold public comments till the end. Okay.
Introduce Jane Crowley.
Yeah, so I want to do some introductions because we do have Because of travel, in some circumstances, we have alternates and alternates joining us for today, and we also do have a new member joining us. So maybe if we could just do a quick go-around and say your name and your affiliation, and just for fun, something interesting about your Thanksgiving holiday. So we can just start over there. We'll start over here. Brian. I always start with you.
Brian Dudley, Mass DEP. My holiday experience is I'm starting a new play at the Academy.
Sims McGrath, Orleans Selectman, and Syracuse University made BC's victory possible.
Bob,
Sorry.
We'll come back to you in a minute, Aaron.
Okay.
Bob Rich, Orleans Water and Sewer Commission, a quiet, happy Thanksgiving at home.
Sid Snow, Orleans Chamber, and let's see, I enjoyed a nice Thanksgiving of 35 people at my brother-in-law's house. I could have done with mine.
Rich Nadler, with Conservation Commission. We still have leftover pies if anybody's interested.
Joshua Larson, Orleans Finance Committee, worst day of Texas football in 10 years.
Jim Robertson, President of the Orleans Pond Coalition, celebrated my grandchild's 8-month-old first Thanksgiving.
Gordon Smith, Orleans Taxpayers Association. The turkey brought a new grandson for me.
Doug Fromm, Orleans Can. We had two, one on Thursday and one on Friday.
Alan McLennan, Orleans Selectman. The grandchildren pulled the moorings in Paul Pond, and we did a good test of the muck. And Ben DeRuyter from the Brewster Selectmen will be here shortly.
Judith Bruce, from the former CWMP. My hat's off to Sid's brother-in-law. I barely made it through 11. Busy, chaotic, but fabulously happy holiday.
Lynn Brunel, substituting for Jeff Eagles and Gary First for the Orleans Water Alliance. They're both in Asia. And Thanksgiving this year, for the first time in decades, no turkey, no cranberries, no pies. Moral victory. Of a kind.
Paul Ammon, former peer review committee.
Joy Cummings, Orleans Community Partnership. I spent Thanksgiving in Plymouth with the very passionate Native Americans.
John Kelly, Orleans Town Administrator. Just nice, quiet dinner at home, having with my 3 kids was nice.
Chris Ramsey, Director of the Orleans Conservation Trust, and I spent the better part of the morning on Thursday digging out my parents' place in Maine.
Jim Gallagher, I'm the alternate. I'm the conservation agent in Brewster, so I'm represented the Conservation Commission. And yeah, two Thanksgivings, both on the Cape, so good day.
Sue Levin, Brewster Town Planner, and a Brewster representative. Actually, this Thanksgiving I got to help a 3-year-old build his first snowman.
Jane Crowley, Eastham Health and Environmental Program Manager. I also celebrated the first Thanksgiving of my first grandchild.
Sandy Bain, liaison from Eastham. Our Thanksgiving always involves several vegetarians, including one who doesn't like vegetables. So it's better in retrospect than it is in actuality.
Suzanne Phillips, Shellfish and Waterways Committee. This year I made dinner for an old friend who's a retired disabled fisherman, and we had no oysters for the stuffing.
Terrible.
Judy Scanlon, Orleans Water Quality Task Force. I was blessed to spend Thanksgiving with my mother, who had just turned 98 years old, and my husband. A small Thanksgiving turkey of a little over 12 pounds, but still enjoyable.
Erin Perry from the Commission. I'm here filling in for Patty Daly today, and it was my son's first Thanksgiving, so.
Oh, nice. The opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah. My parents are really excited.
Carol Ridley with the Pleasant Bay Alliance. I enjoyed Thanksgiving. We're lucky to have all of our boys home for the holiday, and we certainly enjoyed our Eastham tournament. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. And welcome, Jane. Okay, so action items. We are still waiting to get all the background materials posted. That's all being compiled, and we expect that to happen soon. Yeah? Okay. So we're working on that. The panel outreach plan, I did an update, and so I sent that out to you all. So we can talk about that in a second. And I did add panel outreach as a standing item. We did arrange a workshop with the Cape Cod Commission about Tracker. It's going to be next Wednesday, December 10th, from 10 to 12 at the Commission. Everybody who told me about their interest, I've been communicating with directly, but if there are other people who hadn't already told me they were interested in attending, just let me know. And there's plenty of room for you. So no need to bring any materials. They'll have everything ready for discussion and review, and we'll go from there. So we do have copies of the slides for everybody, and a progress flow chart on the TRICOM decision and things like that you'll see today. That'll be part of, and it's in your slides. Updated project schedule hasn't happened yet, but we'll work on that. And we did get the comments from people who were concerned about the schedule slipping, and so we will respond to those directly as well and be clear about where those things will happen. If anybody else had questions or concerns about the schedule, to just let us know. And the conversations with Brewster and Eastham about regional synergies is happening and ongoing, and I think part of that is led to getting Jane to join us here. Any questions about the action items other than the outreach we're about to talk about? Yeah.
Did I miss the street names?
Yes, that'll happen. So we don't have I don't think we updated the old map, but I think for future maps of disposal sites, people wanted the street names. Did you want us to update that previous map?
Yeah, we couldn't read it.
So can we get that map updated? All right. So I will circle that still needs to be done. Any other? Yeah.
Stacy, when I went looking to see whether there were materials that were updated, I went through each of the sections on the website, and I didn't find anything, except I did find one thing that was new, which was this technical document that's dated the 18th of November. Is that part of today's agenda?
So, Mike, do you want to, this is the needs assessment?
No, it's not part of this.
So this is for the benefit of the others in the group. It's called Task 1.0, a needs summary, technical memorandum 1.1. It's a Stantec document prepared for the town, and it's actually a needs summary matrix that refers to existing documentation, and then it includes discussion points. It has the S-curve in it. Remember from a number of meetings ago, it has the S-curve in it. So this was posted out there, but it's only dated the 18th, so it's subsequent to our meeting on the 12th, but it's posted out there.
It's a draft. It's not
I
final.
understand that. But is it going to be on an agenda, or is it just going to sit
Well, it's already been. It was the subject of the second or third workshop.
So, but at the last meeting, I had suggested that people be notified when material is posted. And I would reissue that request so that people don't have to go looking for things that might slip by. And I think it's useful because then people would know to go look for this and see whether they have any comments, because there are sections, next steps, this section was not used, decisions, And it's basically blank. Information review summaries is blank, and stakeholder comments and responses is completely blank. So I would suggest that we have the opportunity to know this is out there for full transparency and be able to comment in case this isn't recorded the way we all thought as panelists, I'm representing Jeff and Gary, thought that that discussion had gone. My suggestion.
Great, thanks, Lynn.
And again, as you said, other materials yet to be posted because there wasn't anything else out there other and last meeting's slides aren't out there yet as of yesterday morning.
Yeah, and I sent those to be posted, so,
okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Along with what Lynn just said, in reaction to the initial presentation of this material, I sent a memo to both of you. And I don't know whether you've done anything with it, whether it's added into this document at some point. It just sort of went into space for as far as I'm concerned. How do we know if any of us make comments, they were either considered or not considered, and why they're not considered, or whether they just go in the basket and forgotten?
That's a good comment. We're still, I put that there this week, I believe, or last week, because it's still being revised. We're still working on those comments, Paul, to get them in there, and other comments we have for that document. There are sections that are incomplete, and we're working to get that revised and finalized. So,
Just to follow up quickly, if you react to comments that any of us make and put them in there, how do we know whether you accepted them, rejected them, or do we have to go searching through there to find out how you reacted to them?
well, I've been trying to respond to sets of comments individually to the people that sent them and those that are copied on a number of you have sent in comments, and we've responded to many of them, not all of them. Some of them we don't have answers yet. Some of them are still being studied, like Step Steg has come up several times as to what we're going to do with it. That's today's agenda item. PRBs is another one. That's today's agenda item. HDD we haven't gotten to yet. There's a lot of comments like that that are on the agenda. If you look at the actual list of stakeholder meetings we have, we're about at the middle now. I think we're still one short of being at the middle of the stakeholder meetings. So a lot of these are not finalized. The comments have not been lost. They're waiting for resolution of them based on some upcoming meetings like today's. So that's where a number of them are. It's not that they've been ignored. They're going to be addressed, and some of them I've addressed when there's clear answers and responses to them. But others haven't been yet because they're still not resolved yet.
Mike, do you think that we can have more of a system for making sure that people are hearing back? And if it's that it hasn't been addressed yet, that at least what they hear back is this hasn't been addressed yet, and that it's going to go somewhere on the website immediately where people can see what's being sent in from people if they want to look, and they hear back, okay, we posted this, we think this is going to come up in meeting 8 or meeting 12 or on this date, right?
Yes. It's a good point, and it's a important point that we need to address and haven't done it thoroughly and properly yet, honestly. The fact is that there's a lot of issues here, and to keep track of the documentation and the responses to the number of questions coming in, each one of you see only one part of them, is almost a full-time job, frankly. So we're trying to keep up with the time we have and resources we have, but we need to put more effort into it. That's obvious, especially as we now get to where these things have to come together into a plan. So we will do that. We'll post more information on the site. We'll make it known when it's posted, and we'll respond to comments, either what the response is or when they're going to be responded to in what stakeholder meetings. So.
And if we can be helpful, even just...
I apologize for that. We've fallen behind on it, and it is a critical part of the program. So.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the on the action items? All right, so turn, if you will, to the draft outreach plan. So we had a discussion about this at the last meeting, some ideas for how to make sure that the conversations and the work that we're doing here goes out into the community as much as possible, and people really know what it is we're talking about, what we're learning together, what work we're doing together, and what we're coming to, right? And so this was a summary of some of the suggestions that people seemed to like, and we didn't have it as a form of an agreement. There were some requests that we had sort of a clear agreement so that the public would also know what it is we're agreeing to do about outreach. What's missing on here, was pointed out to me. We also did talk about trying to have 1 to 2 pieces in the My View column in the Cape Cod Times. So I'll add that bullet to this. And someone asked about the event organized by the Orleans Citizen Forum, whether that was final, whether Orleans Citizen Forum had made the decision that they were going to do such a meeting. And then I was told that yes, that has been made final. Correct?
Yes.
So any other comments or questions or thoughts about this document? Yeah.
I think in the beginning of this whole process, if I'm remembering correctly, we kind of agreed that we would not, as individuals reporting back to other organizations, speak in a way that didn't represent what our consensus had been. And that would imply approved summaries.
Right.
But I'm finding it...
Can't hear what?
I'm sorry. Question, Ed, was we'd agreed, I think, in the beginning to not represent what's happening here to our constituencies, for instance, Eastham in this case, until we have an agreed on summary. So we'd not be talking individually about our own opinions. But I'm finding it really difficult when we're about 4 to 5 or sometimes 6 weeks behind to keep anybody up to date in Eastham. So maybe a not solvable problem, but I think it's going to become more and more important.
Yeah. So for those who had trouble hearing that, we do have in the ground rules that participants in the panel you may speak on behalf of yourself and your opinion, but not on behalf of the panel as a whole, unless it's something that the panel as a whole has agreed to, right? So not to go to your constituents and say, here's what the panel said, and then give your own opinions, right? And to do that so that we're clear and transparent about information. You can go to your constituents and say what you think about what's been happening, but not to speak on behalf of the panel. And so are we getting information out to you in a timely enough fashion that you can share with your constituents the views of the panel? Let me offer this. Maybe what we can try to do is, with each meeting summary, have a paragraph executive summary.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Right? And it's not going to be everything, but at least you'll have the full summary, which is the 10 or 12 pages, and then you'll have a paragraph, and then we're still going to work on trying to have the monthly one-page summaries and the half-page guest commentaries, etc. I don't know. I think that's probably. Yeah.
I have another suggestion, and that is, do we really need to allow us all this much time as we are being allowed to comment and to finalize the summaries? Is there any reason we couldn't do it in the first, in the first meeting after we've gotten them?
Well, we do. I mean, when the turnaround time has been 2 weeks, and it was 3 weeks this time, but we had the holiday, it's hard to get it out to you in enough time to get your comments to have it final for the next meeting. So that's what it ends up. But I should be able to turn it around by, if you guys all promise to get the comments on the November 12th summary, today and tomorrow, I should be able by the end of Friday to have that final and send that all to you final. So that I can do.
The way I look at it is the one-page summaries are really going to be more high-level, general statements about facts, what we've approved, so I don't see there's a lot of need for continuing meeting after meeting, adjustments to it. That's the way I look at it.
And I think it also, we've mentioned this before, that it would be helpful in, I think, in the speed of turnaround to see the handouts ahead of time, to at least get our heads lined up with what's going to be presented, so we're readier for a meeting. That would be very.
That's always a goal.
And number the pages.
It just has not turned out to be possible, given the speed at which we're all working to try and hone in and make this stuff as good as possible for you all in the presentations. We've got our team working over Thanksgiving weekend and up through the last minute to try and really hone this stuff as much as possible for you. So we are trying to get written documents out in advance, and we've had less of those lately. But your request is noted.
At least number the pages, though?
Are they not numbered?
No.
That was the promise for this one. Some are numbered, some are not. The first half are numbered. We're halfway there.
Where?
Way to go.
Oh, here they are.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Stacey.
Anything else about this plan? Is there anyone who disagrees with this plan? Can we say this is a group agreement? Yeah.
I had sent this suggestion, and maybe just throwing it out to a broader group, because I'm less familiar with the possibilities of the potential for something on the radio. And I don't know whether that's a good, I have no idea. So I throw out the innocent idea for a broader dialogue on the potential for something on the radio. Whether that would be just information, and whether that could be also have regional appeal, especially with regard, not so much about the solution, but about some of the new technologies and the other choices. I haven't, again.
Actually, to follow up on that, to be able to perhaps do a discussion and interview a program on local access cable, because then it can be targeted to the specific towns, and also available for, you can put it up on the town's website, so anybody who wants to look at it can watch it in their own time.
Who would they interview?
They can interview the two of you. They can, I mean,
yeah.
I'm off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but if the point is to get information out about the project and reach a wider audience than this room, that's a good option.
Yeah, and I just want to say my concern is, speaking on behalf of the group without the group approving, right? This is why in writing, we can write something, we can get your approval before it gets published or put forward as from the group. I'm not sure I would feel comfortable to be interviewed on the radio and speak on your behalf.
That's what I'm thinking, not so much focused on the solution concept, but rather what are PRBs, what is aquaculture, what can it do? And have it be informative with regard to some of these other ideas as opposed to same old, same old. I don't know whether it would be helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And even to include some background on what the panel's doing, and
Yeah.
so people know that the information's out there. Because
Right.
a lot of people, I don't know how many people actually watch 4 hours worth of meetings, but 15 minutes worth of something that can run on a regular basis on local access cable might be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let us think more about that and come back to you at the next meeting with some thoughts, if that's okay. Given what we have here, though, knowing that it could be added to or changed as we go, but are we all comfortable with saying this is what the panel's outreach plan is about? Okay. Okay. All right. Moving on, does anyone have any other outreach updates? I know there was Sid, was it yesterday?
Last night, yes.
Last night? Do you want to say anything about?
Last night, the Chamber held, Todd and I held a meeting for the Orleans Chamber business people, sorry my voice. And it was a fairly good crowd, and it was well received. The meeting went very well, and it was basically, I took 78 out of your hundreds of slides, put it into a shortened presentation, really just to walk through the process of what we've been talking about in a 10,000, 3,000-foot level at each of these meetings so far. We did receive some questions from the floor, some concerns, and I won't get into the details now. And for the next meeting in January, we hope to have an even larger attendance and get more feedback from the community.
Great.
We're good.
Great.
I'm pleased with it.
Yeah, thanks, Sid.
What were the kinds of questions? Just briefly, or examples?
I just want to get into it right now.
Yeah, so just for time, I don't know, are you going to have any summary or anything written, or can people see your slides posted anywhere, or if they wanted more information, should they just come talk to you?
Stacy, everybody in this room has seen the slides. Sid just
Right, there's
called
slides
them.
from here.
I was there, and it was a nice, fair presentation of where we are and what we're trying to do.
There wasn't that many comments. I'm not trying to hide anything. It's just that I don't think it's appropriate to comment on an individual statement without having their approval to make it public, because this was a meeting solely for the chamber members. It wasn't really a public meeting. It's an informational meeting.
And our hope of how that enters in is that, Sid, as things come up, you're able to voice and ask questions and, raise views from your constituents that you're hearing in those meetings as appropriate here in this forum, right? That's how it's meant to work. Not that you have to share everything that happened, that you hear from your constituents directly, but you as the representative now have more information to go on as to what your constituents are concerned about and are going to want to see in order to be supportive of a plan later. So that's the idea.
All right, so this is going on. So a lot of the concerns were about costs, which is expected. A lot of concerns about things that business has already done. Some of them are working and some of them are not working, and the concerns about that and what they need to do. So it was, dialogues about that. Thanks.
I just wanted to add, I also attended it. Sid did a great job, but it was great to see that there were business owners from different areas of Orleans there. So.
Anyone else have any updates on outreach efforts that you have been doing with your constituents? Yeah, Lynn?
Very simplistic, just with my neighbors, but to echo a point that Sid raises, or just mentioned in passing, is the cost issue. And the cost then of, which comes back to what are the costs, and coming back to the fact that we have no cost information on the bookends, and we ought to be able to know what the costs are for the bookends. And I think that would be important for us to know even as we go into the hybrid, so that we understand what the left end and the right end, or the top end and the bottom end are, if you will, so we know what we're talking about. So that's a big pressure point.
So we'll get to that as we talk about the overview for the next meeting, but there are, because of the decisions we made at the last meeting about how we're calculating using MEP versus the Cape Cod Commission information, there's going to be a disconnect between the bookends and the hybrid. So to do those costings on the bookends would not match up. So we can get into that a little bit more. But there will be cost, but the general point about cost information and the need for cost information is heard, and we're going to get to that.
One comment on that I think is important is that from the point of view of cost estimates at this stage of a program, they're more than order of magnitude, but they're still very rough estimates when we're talking at a conceptual stage. The information we're talking about water use and build out, given the uncertainty as to where it is pretty much within the noise level of these cost estimates. It's not going to affect the span uncertainty of a cost estimate at this stage is greater than the difference in what we're talking about in terms of water usage and growth. So that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue, I think, is that we have our traditional bookend is pretty much the CWMP. The cost estimate for the CWMP is pretty much in place. It can be updated to 2014, 2015, and we could do that. But that's one bookend. The other bookend is non-traditionals, which honestly, as we go to the 208 technology matrix, the costs are very, very general, and there's a big range in those costs. So as we come to that, the cost estimates there, it's not just the installation of the technology, it's the monitoring. There's a lot of different components there that go into it. And our team has been spending a lot of time trying to go actually and get case studies of those projects. We'll talk about a few of those next meeting with respect to constructed wetlands. But it's the same, they're very site-specific. You can't take a technology matrix range or average and use it. It's just not relevant. So they're not wrong, they're just based on applications from different parts of the country, different sizes, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is actually take preliminary conceptual designs of various projects in Orleans, like a constructed wetland in Aries Pond or a PRB on Town Cove, and develop those cost estimates based on real projects. That's a bigger effort than taking a number off a technology matrix and applying it. So that is taking time. We're working on it, but there's not a lot of good numbers out there for these non-traditional technologies. There's not a lot of track record on them. So, but we are working on it. We will have cost estimates updated for the bookends, for the traditional, best we can do on the non-traditional, and for the hybrid at the next meeting.
So
that
for
we
now,
can see the
though,
range.
for traditional, we're using the CWMP as a placeholder?
Yes,
That just basically say that's the number?
yes. Of course, it's an old number now, and there's a variety of changes, like we're not going to use that disposal site, et cetera, et cetera. So that needs to be tracked through. But, and we're doing that.
And again, for the purposes of this group, right, that's not going to be where we go, right? So that number is really not that important for all of you.
Well, but it's
a bookend.
It is.
It's a bookend, but we're moving where we're going to go for the next meeting. I just want to focus us on what's productive, for where we're going to find places where we're going to agree and we're going to come to somewhere better as a town than we started from, right? And we don't want to get caught up in fighting about this dollar or that dollar about something we're not going to propose.
But I think I think that's right. But I do believe that we need to have reference points. That's what the bookends were for.
Yeah.
And we need to put those reference points in place with the assumptions that go in them. There are going to be a number of
Yeah.
assumptions
And
on
eyes
all of them.
open, this is what this
But we
number
are
means.
working to get those in place for the next meeting, along with the hybrid, so we can see the range we're talking about and start looking at trade-offs.
We need to be very careful about numbers. $250 million popped up as a thing out of the air.
That's right.
Atom, and has haunted this town ever since. And it's totally inaccurate. And if we start taking just numbers, I guarantee any number you mention will never go away.
Right.
It's going to be repeated and repeated and repeated. I'm talking about until we get accuracy. Let's get it at least a little bit tuned, okay? Just a little bit more tuned. That's all.
That's
And
really
I
what
think
we've
you
been
guys are
trying to
going
do.
about the right way on that.
The bookend numbers would be helpful in some respects, but also dangerous in others. But the helpful part we want, but we don't want to be focused on those.
And I think, again, we can talk more about this as we get to the end of the meeting for the next meeting, the 17th. But what we've talked about is giving you a range and a comparative symbol, even potentially, of magnitude, so people have something meaningful to work from, but not something that's going to get fixated on, and people will have the wrong idea.
I was just going to say, I agree. I think people get stuck on the details and the numbers, and at this point, when it's very vague and we aren't anywhere near reaching a consensus on how we're going to go forward, to put out specifics is really not the way to go. People will never forget them, and we will be forever. They'll get labeled, and that will be the Water Quality Advisory Panel's plan, whether any of us are behind it or not. So I just recently spoke to the annual meeting of the Friends of Crystal Lake, and I was extremely cautious to stay away from anything of conclusion. And I just talked about the approach, gave information on some of the newer technology that's out there and what it's expected to do and how it might perform and how we're going to try to put all of this together. And I just pushed back anytime someone said, but what's the plan going to be? It was like, don't know that yet. That won't even come until sometime in the spring. And again, I don't know how we can talk about costs until we know what it is specifically that we're talking about. Interestingly, the question that came up repeatedly there was not cost, it was reliability. And that was the big concern that I kept hearing from people, and I think it's because so many of these new technologies are so new, people are like, really? That's going to do anything? That was the big concern of that particular group. But those issues, I think, are the things we need to be addressing and referring people to the approach, the process, the website, the meetings, and urging people to engage and tune in. And one of the surprises to me was out of that group of maybe 40 people, of people who I would expect to be very engaged in water quality issues, not a one of them knew anything about this process going on. So we do need to be talking about it, but to pull people into the process, not to be coming up with plans, in my opinion, at this point in time.
Thanks.
One other comment, I'm sorry. Cost is important. It's absolutely critical. But the financial plan is more important. The financial plan is the big thing. It's the staging, the phasing, the financing, a lot of other things that go into that make it palatable.
Sorry to prolong this. I'm assuming we get everything done to answer the concerns in what you just mentioned. Is it the charge of this panel, or would this go over to the selectmen and what, possibly finance, when we get to that stage, financing, so businesses and property owners know some real figures that are accurate, as most accurate as we can make them, so we don't go into a town meeting where we again have all these bogus scare tactics of it's going to cost you this and therefore don't support
So
it.
just on
When
ground
does that
rules-
come forward?
On ground rules, to maintain respectful language about how other things people might see differently. So.
In
do you want
the
to
interest
answer
of
those?
time, January.
January?
So
But
to
we
the
will
extent-
come out
When we
with
get a
those.
hybrid, when we get a hybrid with cost estimates, we'll start narrowing the envelope. As soon as we get something that can be put into a financial model, which we have ready to start putting stuff into, we'll start then seeing what the knobs on the radio are and being able to tune it, and that's going to take time.
Just to say, to the extent that it's important for people to know how is this thing going to be broken up, how the cost's going to be broken up, how's this going to work, in order to know whether they're going to support it, then we need to address it here. Right? That's part of what we're doing. So to the extent we can bring that in and be clear about what the choices are, what the implications are, all of that, we need to do that.
Process-wise, FinCom is going to be meeting with the consultants separately, and then in a FinCom meeting in January to discuss all this. It's premature to do it now.
Sure.
Because we don't have any information. To the extent that they have generated some information by January, we will have a public meeting in which we will have an open discussion about the parameters of the financial analysis so that we can have a view on the level of detail and what we want to do.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thanks. So we need to move on. I know, Paul, you've been trying hard to repress your desire to say something. I'll just give you that fast.
Okay, I'll make it quick.
Okay.
Having done this for many years, I don't know how you can decide among options without having some idea of the magnitude of cost.
Absolutely.
And Sia put together a slide showing a sequence from a permeable reactive barrier to floating islands to another thing, a sequence. If you don't know what the costs are, maybe that isn't the right sequence. Maybe there's a lower cost start with less risk to start with.
Yeah.
Anyway, point.
That's right.
We got you.
That was
That's
hypothetical.
exactly where we're going to go.
That was hypothetical, just to show the
But I mean,
process.
as we go forward, yes, we will address that issue. It's on there. Okay.
I just have one question about your meeting summary notes from November 12th,
Yeah.
related to the nitrogen reduction goals. Orleans is using the present watershed nitrogen load calculated from the MEP, and then there's a statement that says that the Cape Cod Commission will run a parallel scenario using its present watershed load estimates based on updated water and land use data to ensure consistency. Can you explain that to me?
So this was a big topic of conversation at the last meeting, and if you will indulge us, I will be happy to talk to you
I'll
about
catch
that
your break.
offline afterward,
Okay.
so we don't go back to that right now. Sorry. Okay. So, thanks, everyone. We'll move on. We're a little now behind, but we're going to catch up. So I'm going to hand this over to our Stantec team to start talking about septic and wastewater management options for Tri-Town.
Thank you, Stacy. Good morning, everyone. Gary McCarthy from Stantec, and some familiar faces are with me today. Lou Sirocco is with me again. Sia Karplus from ScienceWares is with us. Steve Calabro, who you've met before as well. And a new face for us is Dr. Angus McGrath from our Walnut Creek office in California. He's joined us, and he's going to work, he's going to give a part of the presentation on PRBs with Sia. So what I'd like to do is just talk just for a minute about the information that we're going to present this morning. We are talking about options for Tri-Town, and in order to, the goal really of this meeting and this information is to prep the group for next meeting, which is a discussion of hybrid solutions. And so we wanted to make sure that you had the information necessary in order to be to make nice, educated decisions as we move forward. Before we talk about Tri-Town plant options, it makes sense to talk about these other items. Septage. You've heard from our team, Charlie Alex on our team gave a presentation on market analysis of septage. It was part of his food waste study as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about those items and some additional info that has that we've developed since then. Makes sense to talk about cluster systems as a potential for maybe a downtown solution. And so we want to talk to you about those systems, what applications they may be good for, applications, and in other applications where they may be challenging. We want to talk to you about wastewater. If there is a wastewater treatment system, where would that wastewater come from? How would we move it most efficiently through town? And then I'm going to give most of that discussion, and then Steve's going to jump in on Tri-Town plant options. What are some of the ideas we have on that site? And Lou's going to give, if we do in the hybrid, if there is a need for collection systems, there's lots of different ways to do it. And so we'd like to give you some of our thoughts on that, on those, at least those three items: gravity, low pressure, step stake systems. And then we'll wrap up the last hour of our presentation will be on permeable reactive barriers. The group's made it clear that they want to know more about that technology, and Sia and Angus will give that part of the presentation. So, moving right along. Why would we continue septic treatment at Tri-Town? Clearly, you've got existing sunken cost and infrastructure in place. Lots of large tankage out there. from a treatment and effluent discharge standpoint, there may need to be some updating, or there would be need to be some updating out there. But you've got existing infrastructure in place, so if you did continue to have septage there, that's a huge advantage. Convenient truck access to Route 6. Everyone knows where the plant is, right off of exit 12. We've got a market of septage in this portion of the Cape, and clearly the Orleans, town of Orleans, has septic systems now, and will very likely have some septic systems in the future as well. And having a septic treatment plant at Tri-Town is an advantage. Keeps the current costs that people have for pumping those systems at a reasonable number. Kind of goes to the comment I just made, maintaining current cost rates. If there were satellite systems or even cluster systems in the hybrid, those systems will treat the liquid wastewater to a certain degree for proper disposal, but there's solids that remain in that process. And having a plant at Tri-Town gives you a local alternative to safely and effectively processing those solids. You have existing IA systems in town, some cluster systems in town. The Tri-Town plant treats those solids now. Before we go much further, I wanted to just talk about the septage quantities and where we think those may be going. There's been some discussion of flat or even declining population rates on the Cape. We did some research, and we presented that information a couple of workshops ago in Charlie Alex's presentation on where we thought the quantities would be in the future. Did some analysis, just polling the building permits in towns along the Cape, averaging 12 to 18 new single-family homes per year over the last 5 years. We looked in detail at each CWMP for the communities listed there, for Orleans, Eastham, Brewster, Wellfleet, Truro, P-Town, Provincetown. Orleans and Eastham are two communities that have, as you know, have some planning for wastewater collection, sewerage in their communities. If those plans were implemented as written, we would expect to have a reduction in septage at the Tri-Town plant or any plant in this region. Brewster, Wellfleet, Truro, and Provincetown, based on the planning documents that are out there, we would expect any septage that we see from those communities now to at least remain. So again, just trying to get the background information to help us understand what the future quantities of septage may be, which then leads to an understanding of what maybe future revenues would be from that processing. The two communities that, at least in current planning documents, the two communities of Orleans and Eastham are showing that there may be sewage collection in the future. Again, in order to get some understanding of quantities in the future and thus revenue in the future. We just took what we thought was a reasonable approach to how much would that, if sewerage was implemented in those communities, maybe when that would be done, and again, how would that impact septage quantities. And we came up with the numbers that are shown on the screen there. So what that does is it allows us to establish a graph such as this. Currently, with those communities,
I'm sorry, I'm not following this. I get that in Orleans and Eastham, where you're saying that there may be sewering, there would then be reduced septage. I don't understand with Brewster and Wellfleet, talking about alternative treatment and oyster beds, that would reduce nitrogen, but how's that going to reduce septage? Are those two towns planning on building no houses and no additional new houses to produce additional septage over the next 10 years?
over which communities are you talking about?
Wellfleet and Brewster.
Based on the, we don't see a significant change in their septage. If, again, just based on prediction of population and what we've seen on new home building in those on the Cape.
They've used the wrong excuse.
If it,
Yeah,
well, it's one
and
scenario.
I don't want to belabor it, but, you know, looking from 2009 in terms of new homes, I think that reflects economy. I don't believe that reflects any kind of population trend on Cape Cod. And I don't believe that Brewster or Wellfleet would plan to have no additional homes built, say, in the next 10 to 20 years to produce additional septage. I get that they're going to address nitrogen reductions in a different manner, but in terms of homes with septic systems that need to be pumped, I can't imagine that there's going to be flat or reduced amounts of septage.
Actually, I think when you're talking about new homes as opposed to I'm taking my grandparents' cottage, tearing it down and building
a new one.
the house I always wanted, that estimate is probably closer than you think. There isn't that much land left, unless we're talking about something like a 40B or say an increase at a place like Ocean Edge. Most of those are going to be treated by their own systems anyway, and wouldn't necessarily they wouldn't be Title V systems, they would be treatment plants. So what you're talking about is the reduction in construction has partly to do with the economy, but it really, to a great degree, has to do with the fact that there's nowhere to build it. So you're not necessarily always talking about taking virgin land and making houses. You're talking about taking existing houses and rebuilding them.
And I guess I was thinking of a new house being, you tear down a one-bedroom cottage and you put up a five-bedroom house, and that to me is a new house. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm
But
looking
two
at
people are
rebuild.
still living in it.
I think
Not in the summer.
the point we're making is we don't see a significant decrease in
Yeah.
septage
Exactly.
on the Cape.
So I guess, and just, if there's uncertainty about future septage quantities, we could add in a little bit more sensitivity analysis to address that. This is their conclusion drawing from the data that they have looked at. If people feel concerned about that, then let's add in the potential that, if you go to your next slide, that there is some increase, whichever, that those numbers aren't exactly like this. There's going to be some uncertainty anyway. So
Right.
if you guys can just add in that sensitivity analysis.
We can do that.
I do think we agreed upon future growth would be nitrogen neutral.
The concept from last.
This is about septic.
Yeah, but septage is, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, not nitrogen, but septage.
So moving along with predicted septic flows as indicated on the graph, we look at revenue and the value at current rates over the next 20 years, and is right around a little over $1 million right now is the revenue at the plant. Considering the fact that the septage may decrease in Orleans and may actually, if you look at the red is for in-district, the green is for out-of-district revenue. The current rate structure at the Tri-Town plant is 10 cents a gallon for in-district and 14 cents a gallon for communities that are out-of-district. So if there was a sewer system in this community, we would see a drop in septage volume and revenue from this community, and thus it's possible that the out-of-district communities would have a larger majority of the flow, and thus what that does is it, because of the difference in rates, it kind of tempers the drop in revenue. But I think
you assume flat rates for the entire 40-year period?
That's correct. And we would, so it's a pretty conservative estimate there. So again, just trying to show what's the value of that, of the septage at least from a revenue standpoint at Tri-Town.
Not to complicate it, but when you do the modeling for the usage levels in terms of what the potential growth could be over the next 40 years, I think you should consider the possibility that the cost drives future changes in zoning, which may involve more homes being able to be built and more people being able to be adding more level to the septage. So in other words, if we incur such costs that it puts a burden on the population can then, in the future, change zoning laws, which can open up more properties, potentially.
Right. Okay. Yes.
At present, is this a money-making venture for the town? Is this a black number or red number for the town? Is the facility, when you talk in terms about why continue, there's no matching slide that says why not continue. And like typically a consultant might have a page that says why not continue, and why not continue would be that it's not a good source of revenue currently, and that there would be other.
We're going to get there.
Yep.
Getting there.
Okay, but is that a money making now?
It is not. It's a break even. They make their revenues are pretty close to what their expenses are. There's not a lot of extra reserve money at that plant.
So we're not making money, and I can't quite tell from the slides how much is Orleans, how much is Eastham, how much is Brewster, and how much is everybody else.
Sorry, can you just hold those and let's see if they get there. Let's talk about what's here, and then they're going to say more, and then if your question isn't answered as they go, we'll come back to you. We had this before. We just want to let them get through it. So if you have questions about what's here, you can ask them.
Just a general question, Gary. Obviously, the groundwater discharge permit expires in December of 2016.
That's correct.
The chart showing the continuation of the plant assumes an infusion, upgrading of the plant. What have you done with the fact that the plant is over-designed now? It barely breaks even if Orleans flow is reduced. Orleans is about 25% of the volume. 50% of the volume is the three-member towns. Half of that volume is Orleans. My question is, if you're assuming revenues are going to stay flat, I don't see the out-of-district picking up. Remember, the septic goes wherever the hauler can discharge cheapest.
Right.
We don't have the flow control. It's beyond our capability to dictate where volume is taken. So I understand the value of the plant staying, but I'm just trying to understand how your chart reflects the major investment, and are we downsizing the plant in order to meet the potential reduced volumes so that we are in fact going to have a more efficient plant based on your slides?
Good, that's a good point, and that's one of the options, and we'll talk about it later. There's two options that you could do at Tri-Town. One is to demolish what you have, if you were to build a plant there, demolish what you have, and to build new septic receiving equipment.
We're about to go there, right?
We'll go there, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just...
On November 17th, I sent to Mike and Stacy a memo about the Tri-Town plan and septic pickup. Did you get a copy of that? Yes, we did.
We did, yes.
You did read it? Okay. One of the things I noted in there is that there is ample evidence to show that septic pickup can be much less frequently than what is now done. I think the average now is about every 3 years. Have you considered that? Because it doesn't look like you have. And if you haven't, why haven't you? And finally, I gave Mike 3 phone numbers of people who have experience and knowledge in this. Have you gotten that, and have you called any of these people?
Steve, sure. Yep. Yeah, so, well, we did review that memo, and it is true that if the town or any town were to put in a monitoring program where someone from the town would go out and monitor people's septic systems, you could greatly decrease the amount of pumping. But we did not project that here because right now there's no system in place to make that happen. That would have to be a decision that was made. So the bombshell situation, if you want, when you look at the costs, is you could theorize and say this revenue could potentially be cut in half. It's not going to double. It could potentially be cut in half. But right now, these predictions that Gary is showing you is based on what's happening currently across the country. There are a few exceptions where...
There are a lot of exceptions.
Well, there are a few exceptions when you look at the number of communities.
So I just want to let them get through these slides because they have more to say about scenarios for the future.
Right.
And this is just one graphic, a very simple picture of if nothing else changed, right, except for a little bit of sewering.
So this is an optimistic scenario.
It is. This is not looking at all of the different permutations and things that can happen.
Right.
We're going to get into that a little bit as we go through the slides. So let's just let them do that, and then we can. You may still have the same comments, and we can have this conversation. But I'd rather they do the slides first.
In all due respect, it's a realistic estimate based on what's happening in the industry. Could there be changes? Absolutely. Okay. But you know, we felt it was realistic based on the industry as a whole.
Thank you, Stacy. What I'd like to do now is move on to cluster systems. There's...
Hold on. We're moving to a different topic. This is a different topic. So I think some of the questions that have been asked on septic should be responded to now while we're on the topic. And one thing I'd like to say is that Steve presented this as a realistic picture of current day operations. The plant, if you talk to the people there, Jay will tell you it's on a shoestring. It's breaking even. If someone goes to Dennis Yarmouth, Ocean Edge goes to Dennis Yarmouth, they lose money. If they come back next month, they make money. It's right on the brink right now. However, it's not functioning properly, obviously. There's no asset management. There's no capital repair and replacement. The plant is going downhill like that. You just don't see it every day, but you see it over time. So it needs a whole new management structure to go forward. The information based on the current situation frankly, would say, don't do it. But that's not, this plant is designed, built, the capacity, it's over capacity. There's a lot of stuff that can be done that brings this into the 21st century. Based on existing conditions, you wouldn't do it. But that's not what we're looking at going forward. So we have to put something on the table for septage only, if that's going to be a septage only plant. I believe it is viable, but it needs a different management framework, different rate structure. You can't operate at flat rates for 20 years. Nothing in life works like that. So with regard to the issues here, this is maybe present picture, pessimistic or optimistic, but it's only the present picture.
I want to follow up.
Let Brian comment here.
I think the other thing, though, to keep in mind as well is that it's not just a question of fixing the Band-Aid approach that's been taken in terms of operation and maintenance and upkeep there. Don't forget that this originally was permitted as a Class 3 plant, and when it comes time to re-permit it, it's not going to be a Class 3. It's going to have to meet a nitrogen standard of 10, which means that there's going to have to be significant cost in terms of upgrading that plant.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that it may not always be valid just to view the Tri-Town plant as whether it's a good or bad business decision. It offers a public service, and that has value.
I want to follow up about this pumping. I think what Steve said about having a system set up to actually monitor the septic tank levels is correct. But included in that memo was a snapshot of part of an inspection done on my septic tank after 2.5 years. 2 people in a house, 1,000-gallon septic tank. 2.5 years, 1 inch of sludge, and 3 inches of scum. Now, why would I have to pump that on a 3-year interval? And the point, going to what Steve is saying, it would be far cheaper to put in an inspection system than to pump a septic tank every 3 years.
Well, that's what we're talking about. That's the way it's being done now. You're right. The way it's going to be done in the future is different.
The net effect is the septic levels could be half of what he's talking about, and it would probably, and it should be looked at economically.
Right. And the price is going to change.
So just to, I want to make sure that we're capturing the analysis you guys want to see done here about septage. What I'm hearing is, so what you've heard is the current structure, and if we continued on like that, we're now talking about possible or even required changes in the future. We know the future is not going to look like the present, right? First of all, there's clearly an upgrade required, right? There's money, that's going to cost money. Mike's saying a different management structure could really make a difference. Different rate structure could really make a difference. Frequency of pumping could make a difference. Some of these might increase the revenue, some of them might decrease revenues, right? Are there other things you think should, the other thing we've looked at already is different levels of septage, right? The frequency of pumping plays into that, but other growth possibilities, sensitivity to that. Are there other things that you think need to be accounted for and you want to make sure that they're looking at? Lynn?
Is there a really radical opportunity to walk away altogether and get out of the business and consider the changing the cycle? I live in a 4-bedroom by myself, and I certainly don't need to pump every 3 years. But if we walk away, readjust the quantity, the volume, and just get out of the business altogether.
So we're gonna get to that. Right now, I just want to talk about if we're looking at the viability.
By adjusting the numbers and understanding the numbers and the economics and making the overall business decision, which is not just changing the management and changing the rate and so on. Another concept of is getting out of the business altogether.
That's absolutely right. That's
Getting out
one of the
not
options.
closing it,
And I
but
think that
actually-
everybody at the table needs to
Oh, I
understand
see
that
what you're
an
saying.
option is
what-
getting out of the business.
What Mr. Rich said is correct, is that it's a public service, but it's only a public service if the cost is competitive. If the cost doubles, it's not a public service, because you pick up the phone, you're going to call a hauler, he's going to come and get it and take it someplace else. You'll get the same service.
As they do now.
You'll just pay more for it. So it comes down to the economics. The other factor here is the design of the facility. It may be that it should be designed for half what it's designed for now. John?
One of the issues, and Brian Dudley will be involved, whatever is proposed to go forward, if the plant will continue, will require DEP permitting, regulatory review, there will be a staffing plan they'll have to approve. Obviously, that is a fixed cost, regardless of the volume of material. We had an inspection and maintenance program in 1985 when Tri-Town was first created, and the responsibility was to go around district-wide, inspect tanks, determine when the pumping. Guess what? That adds cost. So the more cost you incur, the revenue is going to be dictated by where they can dispose of the cheapest. You're looking at probably a subsidized operation from respect of operating costs.
Let me make one comment there. Something funny is going on the Cape from Hyannis to Truro with regard to the hauling rates. On one hand, we hear if Tri-Town closes, they're going to pay double. On the other hand, we hear that if it ups its rates by 2 cents, people don't go there. They're not consistent. Something's going on there, and my suspicion is that the haulers are playing games with the plants, that they're playing Dennis Yarmouth off with Tri-Town, and if Tri-Town goes up, they go to Dennis Yarmouth, lose a little bit of money, Tri-Town goes right back down. Dennis Yarmouth gets the benefit, but if they try to raise it, they go back to... So something's going on here that we haven't been able to figure out yet in the market, and we got to get a handle on it, because the option right now is not to go off Cape. Otherwise, the price would be set based on the actual cost to run the facility and the value to the customer. That's not happening. Every place else, and who else could get by with 20 years without raising rates for anything? So we got to figure that out.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think we should consider the demographic trend, at least on the lower and outer Cape, supported by the census that shows more of our real estate is being owned and used seasonally by part-time residents.
But in huge numbers.
One last point. 75% of the waste, the septage is coming into Orleans for treatment, comes from other towns, Brewster, Eastham, and on up the Cape, 75%. So if you do a rough calculation, if you treat that here in Orleans, you have to get rid of that wastewater in Orleans, and it's not going into Nantucket Marsh, at least under the present thinking. So it's got to go somewhere else. If you reduce that nitrogen level to 5 milligrams a liter, that wastewater coming from all the other towns will contain 150 kilograms of nitrogen a year. So the other towns are getting a free disposal in Orleans waters, and there should be a premium on all those other towns to compensate for that, if I'm clear. And that should be figured in, by the way.
Because the out-of-town rate comes.
Two things, quickly. First, semantics. I don't think it's a public service. This is a public health need. And if you're satisfying a public health need, if you don't provide the service, you've got a public health problem. And I lost the second one.
But that will come back to you. So,
Well, the point you're getting at, though, Sims, is that if the rate goes up, people stop pumping when they should pump. So then you're threatening the failure of the system and the pollution of the groundwater.
The other side of that, Mike, is that if you don't provide the opportunity to dispose of the product of the pumping, then people can't pump. And so it gets to the elasticity of the market.
That's right.
And we've been trying to the selectmen have been trying to get a grip on this, and anytime you call someone, they say, well, we're at capacity. We've got, maybe 9% excess capacity in the off-season, and we are flat out in the summer when everyone's here and having problems with their septic system because there are too damn many people in the house. So what we really need to get a grip on is what is the real capacity to manage septage wherever it comes from. And we've been through this transfer station discussion, and the fact of the matter is, if Tri-Town closes the doors, locks the gates, where's the stuff go? It's not going to be a problem right away, but it's going to be a problem 5 years down the road.
No, even before that, very soon, that's right. Because DY doesn't take it in the summer. They basically won't take Tri-Town septage in the summer because they're overloaded. They're also going to be closed now for some period of time for maintenance. I think 6 months or something like that, Brian, for repair and maintenance. So all of these factors, and they're not expanding. Hyannis won't take it, so that's a key factor, and it may be closer than 5 years.
Just one comment. We talk about declining populations, and at the same meeting, we talk about new structures and new bedrooms. And I think we happen to be living in a period, the gray-haired people, where we are becoming a larger percentage of the town of Orleans. But things change, and we have to keep track of the number of bedrooms that are being built in the district, because we have to assume that someday they might be filled. I think back to what happened right after World War II, when Levittown was built. 2-bedroom homes of 560 square feet, I believe, and this was the GI's dream home. Within 10 years, those houses were all expanded to 4 bedrooms because the family size increased. And if they had designed the sanitary system for 2 bedrooms, they would have been in deep trouble 20 years later. So we've got to think about population, that's part of it, but we need to think about ultimate capacity, which is the number of bedrooms that are being built over time.
Yeah, I would just agree, and I think there's no question but that we're losing our younger population in our workforce, but we're not losing our summer people, and we're not losing our retirees. And yes, everything that's being built is at least 4 bedrooms, and those bedrooms are chock-a-block full through the summer. I mean, you drive around town, and you don't have 1 or 2 people in that house. That house is absolutely bursting at the seams with family and friends that have come to move in for the summer. That's a tougher thing to track, but those people aren't closed systems. While they're visiting, they're leaving us their best, and we have to deal with it.
Yeah, and if we think about it in terms of drinking water, what would happen if we planned our drinking water to the winter population? What would people drink in the summer? You can't do that with a utility. You have to plan for your worst case. That's the responsibility of a utility.
With regard to Alan's comments, though, about planning for the thinking ahead and the number in the future, the only yes but that I put on that is if that we were to plan for that, I would wonder, okay, but what jobs are they going to have? What are those people in those bedrooms going to be doing for their jobs in those homes? What the people that are going to be living in those 4 bedrooms, what jobs are they going to have? We'd have to see a real radical shift in the overall economy to support the people living in those, year-round, in those 4 bedrooms. And it's going to be a long time unless we really, everybody starts to work remotely and everybody's working online all day to be able to have all those people living full-time, year-round in those 4 bedrooms.
So I think that the key point there is there needs to be a consideration about those potential changes. Debating whether or not they're going to happen doesn't seem like it's going to help us. We're not going to come to a conclusion about that here in this group, but I think the point of uncertainty about future occupancy of even existing buildings or expanded buildings is important to add to this. Are we missing anything else that needs to be considered in this analysis that you feel like is missing. I'm just keeping comments to the table for today, sorry. Okay, so we will get back to talking a little bit about this as we get into the options for Tri-Town. Sorry, I was confused about where we were.
Let me make one transitional comment.
Yeah.
And Stantec pointed this out this week that I think is important. I thought you were going to mention, maybe it's later on, Gary, you're going to bring it up. And this is not stated to encourage decisions on wastewater going to Tri-Town. But if there were wastewater going to Tri-Town, and the plant was designed to handle wastewater, then the septage issue, correct me guys if I'm saying it incorrectly, the septage issue becomes less critical. It's not as sensitive to that, because if it goes up, it goes up. If it goes down, it goes down. It's not that big a percentage of the plant. The revenue, they have another revenue stream on the wastewater, so it's much easier to function taking septage in that way as it is to have a standalone plant that's footing all of the bill for the capital and operating costs on that one source of influent. So that's a factor going as we go into wastewater options.
And we will, I think, get to that, right?
Well, just to add to that, Mike, in a typical wastewater treatment plant operation, the operational costs of a plant are typically paid by the wastewater fees and connection fees and user fees, and any revenue that's drawn in from septage, it's extra money. That's the typical model for these plants.
Now that's typical. That may not be the rate structure we use here, because that's having wastewater subsidized septage, and we want to run them both. This is conjecture right now, but my sense is we want to run them both as money-making or enterprise funds themselves, so that we're setting septage rates based on what the value is outside Orleans and other things. But that's a point that needs to, and that's a good point that needs to be considered.
I think to take from that for now, and we'll bring it into the
Sure.
rest of the conversation, is if you take all of these factors and uncertainties or changes within them, and you pile them all into a range, right, where does that get you? And I think what we're hearing is if it's not septage only, it's less important. These questions become a little bit less important.
Yep.
So as we go, maybe we'll figure out how much of this analysis we really need to do.
Right. Okay.
Can we, yeah?
I don't know if this factors in, but nobody's talked about rentals. And I only bring this up because I've been trying to help a single dad with a 7-year-old child find housing in Orleans, which is very difficult to do with it's affordable. But I have responded to ads on Craigslist to look at apartments, and you get scheduled to see an apartment, but people show up at the actual location with a checkbook in hand because they are so desperate, because there is no place for people to rent in Orleans. So when an apartment comes up, there's probably 20 people from other towns who want to live here trying to get that apartment. So I know Orleans changed the bylaw, I believe, or zoning bylaw, to encourage people to build attached accessory apartments to encourage an increase in availability. More and more people may realize that, you know, they can get rental income but also help provide housing. That is the rental, people coming in to rent is not going to decrease in Orleans because the need is so high. So it is something to consider. That will not go down. It will only go up. If there's something available, people are going to come from Eastham, Brewster, other places to live here.
So,
Clusters.
cluster. The next topic we wanted to address with you was cluster treatment. And Steve Calabro touched on this a couple of workshops ago, where he differentiated between cluster systems, satellite systems, centralized treatment systems. So what we want to do is just to review cluster system treatment in preparation for our later discussion this morning on Tri-Town, and ultimately to help get people prepared for any alternatives that are offered during a hybrid discussion. So what are they? Typically used for homes and businesses that are distant from any central treatment facility, typically. Typically, there's a driver for a facility such as this. So you can look at a new business, maybe a supermarket or a restaurant or some other larger water user, thus wastewater producer. In order for that private developer to get their project implemented, they need to have a wastewater solution, and that's where a lot of these types of systems originate from. In the range of 2,000 to 20,000 gallons per day, just to give you an idea of size. Some of the more complex cluster systems can treat to the 5 to 20 milligrams per liter or parts per million for nitrogen. Except it requires a site for it, and typically disposal is on that site as well. Requires a professional design and professional treatment. Usually the owner would provide or would have a contract with a private entity that's a certified wastewater treatment plant operator, be there on a regular basis, filling out reports, submitting those reports to DEP. Many times these cluster systems serve a number of very local buildings, so there's some piping and collection that's associated with some of these systems. It's a groundwater, provides an effluent that is then discharged to a groundwater disposal system, large leach field typically. Sometimes is pumping to that effluent disposal or groundwater discharge system. A significant point for these types of facilities is there's no on-site processing of the solids. So the solids are pumped out by a septic system hauling operation, and they're disposed of and treated at a main treatment facility, such as Tri-Town or other wastewater treatment plants. There's ownership has to provide. That's related to the certified operator, making sure that the unit's meeting its permit requirements. It's a potential for alternative to a larger system, and again, more typically, it's located in remote areas. So that's what they are. A couple of advantages that we thought we'd share is it potentially could save capital cost to prevent the need to pump the wastewater to a central facility. Another advantage might be the actual cost to build and operate is borne by the actual generators themselves exclusively. Again, the model of a business or a group of homes that are remote, those folks are responsible for the building and operation of that system. And if we wanted to consider it as an alternative to a downtown collection system, we wanted to kind of play with that option a little bit. We've got a map we'll share to help folks understand what that might look like. And just to note, there are a couple of systems in town already that are operating. Some disadvantages, because they're smaller systems, you need many more of them to handle the wastewater load. They have sensitivity to flow variations. They're not as complex as a centralized wastewater treatment facility, so they have sensitivity to those flow variations. If there's, again, regarding the sensitivity, if there was something funky in the wastewater that could disrupt the biological process, if a unit maybe loses power or is maybe not operated correctly, there's typically poor performance. Solids need to get removed from the site and treated at a main plant. Going back a couple of workshops, Steve presented some information on both capital and O&M costs, and for these smaller treatment facilities, you can imagine with the loss of economy of scale, you pay more per gallon for these smaller systems, both in O&M and capital cost standpoint. Again, going back to professional management, to O&M, to operate and maintain and to monitor these units. If we did consider these units for an area of town, now you're discharging that. Typically, you would discharge that wastewater local to these treatment facilities, so that may be a concern in some parts of Orleans where we're trying to pull wastewater flow and ultimately nitrogen discharge. We're trying to pull that from some of the sub-watersheds in town. If we were to try to...
Your question.
Just a couple points on this. Number 2, more sensitive to seasonal operation. Just a curiosity on that. If a couple of these, for example, might be Wise Living, and I think the Church of the Transfiguration is another local. I don't know that facilities like that would be so subject or as subject to seasonal operation. I'm not sure what the concept of seasonal operation is. And another question, number 8, requires more complex professional management program. What would that be? Why would these have a more complex professional management program for proper O&M and monitoring?
It's just professional. The point is, it's professional certified operator to run a system like this, as opposed to any
More
septic
complex
system.
than what?
Let me comment on that. It is obviously would not require more training or certification than a central plant, obviously. It's not complex compared to that. The complexity here comes in that, say you took the downtown area.
It's just not your household person.
It's not your, this is
That's
more
the point.
comparing it to on-site systems or Title V systems or even INA systems. The complexity in terms of the management program comes in here when you have 14 of these through downtown. You have the operation and maintenance and the monitoring on all of those systems.
A layer.
So instead of monitoring at one disposal site at one location and having an on-site staff that's trained to manage a particular plant, you now have 14 possibly different kinds of systems with different disposal areas, different monitoring requirements all over the downtown.
So, in other words, right now, each of these is standalone and self-responsible. What this refers to is if the town has them scattered about. That's the complexity here.
If you're talking about nitrogen removal and you're talking about...
That's the complexity. It's not the on-site responsibility. Okay. And then the seasonal is, again, the town's seasonality. It's not the current existing operation.
Well, some of these systems are challenged in the wintertime when there's less flow. So
And the idea here is if you were going to apply these beyond where they are now.
Right, to
try to solve our
remote
current
geography.
nitrogen problems in town.
Right.
and in particular in downtown.
Yeah.
That's what this is looking at. These would be a disadvantage in that context.
The other thing is that these are biological systems. They basically grow bugs, and the bugs eat the organic matter.
And if the bugs freeze.
Yeah, the bugs freeze, they die if they're not used for a significant period of time. When you start it up again, that's
Yeah.
when you have the operational problems, is you have to rebuild that biomass.
And so I was thinking more in terms of, the other one was number 4. I'm thinking in terms of where these already are, and I'm thinking, well, they already have generators in place, and with a power outage, we wouldn't necessarily install generators side by side with these. We would be reliant on, got it, I'm there.
Yep.
I'm not sure what exists here in town fits this description. Coastal Engineering runs several of these operations. They have operators. At Wise Living, it's 2 hours a week for an operator to come by. Okay? The costs you're talking about are not really extraordinarily, you say higher O&M costs. I don't think they are compared to a centralized system.
Per gallon.
Per gallon, per gallon. Looking at it from or per living unit, or whatever you want to look at. And if you look at, you were talking about the nitrogen levels will vary seasonally or whatever. They're steady as a rock for about 7 years, and they're about 6 parts per million. So I think unless you look at some of these which you've outlined in the next slide and actually look at the information to find out if these hold for these systems, I question some of these vague disadvantages.
Right.
You have to differentiate between those that are operated and permitted under Title V versus those that are operated and permitted under the Groundwater Discharge Permit Program. Anything over 10,000 gallons a day will require a groundwater discharge permit, and the operation and maintenance does become significantly more advanced, and the amount of time spent at a plant usually is about 2 hours a day, at least 5 days a week. If you're keeping something under 10,000 gallons a day, then there are different requirements depending upon the type of treatment and the type of technology that you're using. But I would think that, you know, in terms of economies of scale, even if you are looking at, you know, some kind of cluster system, you, in all likelihood, are going to be looking at something over 10,000 gallons a day. So I think it is, I think it is accurate to discuss O&M in that light and under those requirements, in addition to the monitoring and sampling program that has to go along with that. One other thing that I would mention also in the advantages, it was said that, you know, direct capital and O&M cost responsibility is to the generators and sources of wastewater. That's true when you're looking at a private enterprise, say, like a shopping center for a condominium, anything like that. But if this is being done under the auspices of a town-wide program, I think operation and maintenance is going to fall under the administration of whatever town wastewater management entity is provided, and not left to the individual owners of those plants.
Just quickly, under the O&M per gallon cost, and I don't want to go back several meetings, did you put in replacement costs? Is that included in here? I know some of these parts for the step stags and the cluster systems die after 20 years or have a 20-year lifespan. So were those in there?
That would be a typical,
That was in there,
budget,
though?
that's correct.
Okay, I just want to know if we could, you assume that was in those numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to propose we get through the cluster system slides,
Great.
and then we have the discussion about cluster systems. We won't move on to the next, we'll just get through those. I think there's a number of questions and things we can discuss to make sure this makes sense to everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Stacy.
Can you hold this?
Yes,
Ellen? Can you hold it till we
I
get through
can.
this?
We have one more slide.
What we thought we would do with this slide is just give folks an idea of the scale of what these systems might look like if it was thought that we could solve our issue with cluster systems in the downtown area. And so we're indicating, just to give folks, this red line area is, for this discussion, we're calling downtown. Round figures, about 100,000 gallons per day from wastewater generators in this area. For orientation, there's a tri-town site. So moving along, we've got 3 systems that are in the 20,000 gallon per day range. Skakit Corners has a unit. It's a BioClear unit. Orleans Housing has a unit, and the Community of Jesus has a treatment system as well, in the 20,000 gallon per day range for each of those. We just scattered locations of other facilities of similar, maybe smaller size, but you get the picture. There's a lot of units that would be required in order to treat the wastewater that's generated in that area. The other issue you have with that is, again, typically the discharge or the effluent from those plants is typically discharged locally at the unit. So in this scenario, we're not doing what we would prefer to do, which is to remove that effluent and thus that nitrogen from the subwatershed. In order to, again, you can imagine if you get this many units, cluster-type systems downtown, you've got some piping in order to convey the flows from the individual properties to these units. I guess one other thought we had was we've got 2 sites that have been identified in other presentations right at the Cloverleaf that are potential alternative discharge sites. Again, just to maybe there would be an opportunity to collect the wastewater or the effluent from these facilities and discharge it at that location. So again, we wanted to, this is not a likely scenario, but we just wanted to, again, to try and give people a sense of scale for these types of facilities.
So,
one more point on that.
Yeah.
That Lou made some maps for me yesterday that were very interesting. You don't have them in the presentation, but he put a red dot everywhere that there's a septic tank downtown. There's 268 systems in that area. There's 500 septic tanks. Some of them have multiple septic tanks. So while this may look complex, if you look at the existing system that's down there, it's much more complex. So to get flow, for instance, to this facility here, you'd need pipes coming from all directions to cover those 268, somewhere between that and 500 different systems that have to be collected. If you don't get them all, say you only got half of the sites here, then you're still looking at some kind of pipe to go someplace else. So unless you get it all, the cluster system really doesn't work. It's like going into a cul-de-sac and getting 4 of the homes and not the other one. It sort of doubles the price. So it's the reason that they're used in remote areas is because of a lot of the characteristics of the types of systems they're talking about.
So here's what I want to do. I want to talk about why cluster systems seem, like what people like about the idea of a cluster system, instead of just debating cluster system and no cluster system, because as we've seen, people don't even necessarily have a shared definition of what makes something a cluster system or not. I want to move us away from just cluster system, no cluster system, and get more into what are we trying to achieve? What would a cluster system, if you like cluster systems, or you know anyone who likes cluster systems, or you've ever talked to anyone who can tell you what they liked about them, right? What is it about those that is appealing, so we can get to to those characteristics, and then we can talk about how do we respond to those, rather than cluster system or no. Does that make sense? Alan?
Quick question.
Yeah.
Does a typical cluster system deal with phosphorus?
It could. It can. It can. If you want to design it for phosphorus, you can.
Thank you.
But it's more expensive, so either way, capital and operating.
I've heard some people in just, casual conversations say that what they like about the cluster system, and they may not even be accurate, but what their perception is that it will solve the water quality problem without opening up significant changes to the town itself, in terms of future changes relative to sewering.
And when you say changes to the town itself, what do you mean?
Well, I think the perspective is that sewering will enable more growth, apartments over retail stores, and just to change the town's character, whereas the clustering, by the nature of the fact that it's limited and it will self-regulate future growth and future changes in the town.
Mm-hmm. Great. It's exactly the kind of thing I'm trying to get at. Yes.
Cluster systems have the ability for rapid response in peripheral areas. You can put them closer to where sources are closer to impaired estuaries, so that you stop the flow of nitrogen into an impaired estuary sooner.
And what makes them quicker?
Proximity.
Sewer.
But what if you sewer? You can't sewer there?
Well, let's take Mayflower Point. Can't really get there because you have to go across waterways. So you could put a package plant out on Mayflower Point that just deals with that area. You are close to Pleasant Bay, rapid response in terms of getting nitrogen out of the groundwater flow, and you're dealing with an area that you really can't get to with a big pipe, because the big pipe would have to go across a herring run.
Yep, okay.
Eastham's a completely different character community where we have on-site private wells, and we will for decades to come, even though we are in the process of installing a partial municipal water system. So we have cluster systems that serve the need to provide the public health aspect of treating the wastewater to a lower level of effluent content than we would otherwise. So it's for a public health perspective, and for the immediacy, I think, is where Sims is going as well. Solves the particular problem, particular location.
Yeah. And so, but that is, it's in cases where a more centralized system isn't as feasible, whether it's politically or economically or location geographically.
Yes, and I think that Eastham is not going to do wastewater treatment throughout the entire town, so we're going to constantly be dealing with the issue of local development.
Okay. What else?
You can put them where you need them. Avoid centralized infrastructure. And based on my quick tour I took of the Wauquasit facility, they're servicing about 800 guests, approximately, 2 restaurants, and the mechanical portion of the system is in a one-car garage-sized building, effluent discharged under a tennis court adjacent to their outdoor eating area. Zero odor there at all. So that's what I like about it.
So it's can be efficient in using space.
Sure, you put it where you want it, and it appeared to do a great job.
Okay.
And that's a classic good application for this type of system. It's remote. It's very hard to get, as Sim said, very hard to get a sewer there. Very expensive to get a sewer there. It's probably professionally managed. Probably
2 hours a day. Yeah.
So let me now ask this. Looking at downtown, Because we've gotten a couple of things that people like, particularly in remote areas. If we're not in a remote area, what do people like? What are some things? I mean, going back to the advantages, you know, as Brian said, maybe you can't just attribute cost directly to the users. But some of the things I've heard that people like is it might be a little bit more straightforward on assigning costs. And, you know, making it less of a full public cost. Maybe it lends itself better to public-private, or at least a clearer allocation. Is that relevant? Is that important? Just people, to anybody?
Okay. An opposite position, which is, I get that a lot of people feel that those who are actually using it and putting water into it need to be the people who pay for it. What that kind of doesn't sit right with me in that the nutrient loading to our waterways is a town problem. It's not an individual problem. We're all contributing to it. We're all part of the problem. So it seems to me that we all need to be paying to fix it. For us, and you look at this, and this is primarily commercial properties that are downtown. Well, we all use and enjoy Town Cove, and we all want to see it improved. And I think it shouldn't just be the downtown commercial merchants who have to pay to clean up Town Cove. It seems to me like, aside from the fact that we're all using those commercial establishments and very much appreciating them and wanting them, we all like to go out to eat, we all want to go to doctors' offices. We need those businesses that are supporting this town. I don't think that the owners of these businesses should be single-handedly stuck with the cost of fixing up our waters and providing these services.
Okay, so thanks for clarifying that, and I definitely didn't mean to imply that we all think this is a good thing, that we should allocate costs in this way. What I just want to get at is those who do want to allocate costs clearly, that might be something they like about a system like this, right? And what I'm really trying to get at here is maybe we don't need to argue about the size, maybe we don't need to control the size of the system in order to achieve people's goals. Maybe we might find there are enough advantages to not having super small systems that are repeated all over, but we still can talk about meeting or not meeting these goals no matter what kind of system we use, right? That these are not the only way to achieve these goals. Clusters are not the only way to do this. You can limit or not increase potential growth in other ways, right? There are other mechanisms that may be available to do this if this was something you wanted to do. And same with cost. There may be other ways, right, that you could do this if you decided it was something you wanted to do. It might not be something you want to do. I'm just trying to get at what are the potential things we're trying to achieve so that we could think about the full range of ways to achieve them.
Yeah, an interesting question. Of all these stars that are in the bounded area, what's the total capacity for treating the wastewater?
That
100,000
What's the capacity of the units you have started? Capacity to treat it?
That was my question too, Paul. Are those 10,000 gallon a day or larger?
Yeah, we were suspecting that they'd be 10 to 15,000 gallons.
Do you know what they are? Have you?
We have not.
They're not real.
They're not real.
Pardon?
They're proposed.
Some would be higher, some would be...
exist. Oh, okay.
There's three that do exist.
There's one at Stop and Shop.
Skakit is here. Those are in the 20,000 gallon per day range, I think.
Now, when you cite the range of 100,000, is that the peak summer load? Is that the average?
It's
Because
the
you have to
average.
design for the peak load.
It's the average day flow is
What would be the
100,000.
peak load?
Probably 2 or 3 times that.
2 or 3 times, yeah, easily.
So 300,000 gallons a day.
Possibly. I mean, we haven't looked at it closely,
So what
but
you
it's
haven't
more than
done
100.
here is designated out of these stars, which ones exist and which ones are just hypothetical.
All the ones that are within this so-called downtown area are hypothetical.
This is the already here.
There's 3 existing units. There's the Community of Jesus up in this area here. There's the Orleans Housing, which is on this side of Town Cove.
I have trouble.
And there's the Skakit Corners facility.
You don't have Wise Living in there?
Less than 10,000 gallons a day.
But I was asking, okay.
If I could...
Sorry,
I'm
Paul,
trying to
you're not
understand what
done.
the total capacity exists in place right now to handle water in that region. That's what I was asking.
Nothing.
Zero. I would guess the downtown, correct me, but wastewater generated is 100,000 gallons a day inside that polygon. That right now is being handled by 268 plus different systems. What Stantec is, septic tanks, right? Inside that area. What Stantec is saying is to put those pull them together into cluster systems at higher level of treatment, more significant O&M, et cetera, you might be able to do it in 14. The dots are really based not so much on the number, but where sites could potentially be for putting these kinds of facilities.
What is it?
The ones that are already here.
The Skakit Corner and the...
Yeah, he's saying, does the capacity already exist?
Oh, there's
Today.
Yeah.
You're asking what capacity there is outside this?
No.
Or in the general proximity, because the Cape Cod 5, I believe, has a unit, Wise Living has a unit, Shaw's has a unit, Stop and Shop has a unit, and there may have been a couple of I didn't identify. That's what I was just trying to answer.
Those are all under 10K.
That's great.
Yeah, but they exist.
Yeah, right. They do. There's 268 of them.
Yeah, if I could just try and sort this out a little bit. The 3 stars outside have discharge permits from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They're over 10,000 gallons per day. They all happen to be owned by single landowners who service only their land, which is a critical thing. So Skakit Corners, for example, could not expand until they put in their system. So it seems to me that we have, and I'm familiar with Wise Living as well, which is less than 10,000 gallons per day, but we have records in the town and at Barnstable County as to how these systems work. And we need to find out what they cost to build, what they cost to operate, and so forth. Now, I think we need to do that so we can have a rational discussion. I would also point out, because they came up earlier today, I'm very familiar with Wequassett Inn. That is a seasonal operation, 6 months on, 6 months off. The other big one that's within 5 miles of here is Chatham Bars Inn, which has a discharge permit as well, seasonal. But the key is that those systems were installed so that the owners of those properties could expand. And everywhere else we're talking about, we have potential multiple ownership, which raises a whole nother issue.
I would recommend removing the clear allocation of cost point there, because just because a system is smaller does not mean that allocation of cost is easier. Allocation of cost is simply dividing one number by another. So it's choosing any 2 numbers that you want to allocate by, and simply being smaller does not mean, A, it's any easier to do, or that it's more accurate a measure of what you're trying to measure.
That's a good point.
Actually be more complex, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh. We once went on a tour that the Orleans Board of Health had organized of treatment plants. These were full treatment plants, I believe, not cluster systems. But to address the issue of seasonality, there was one where there was maybe a Dennis High School, maybe it was Harvard, I can't remember, and that would be used on a 9-month basis. Next to it was a Stop and Shop, which would have tremendous usage in the summer and less in the winter. And I just wondered if there was some of the seasonal issues could be addressed even with cluster, with combining users of that type. In this area, there's the Orleans Middle School, as well as the grocery store and some other year-round groups.
I think there are opportunities for public-private. And so I think in the end, it would come down to how many units do you need to handle the load, and what would be the relative cost of those units to build and operate compared to other options.
And that's exactly right, because one of the things we've looked at, this outline is getting old, but what you're talking about, Sandy, is right here. That's a September through May flow, which is really through June. She's got kids.
And right across the pond is a motel, would kick in
That's
for
right.
the summer.
So that's the kind of thing you want to combine to get that equalized flow over the year. We would redraw this boundary, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Could someone clarify for me, if you have a watershed, an area in town where 100% removal of nitrogen is required, and the cluster systems discharge the wastewater on the site, can those be considered for that area or not?
What it would force you to do is to sewer more so that we reach our goal.
So they could be used in addition to other...
Other things, right.
Well, it's 100% reduction.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you sewer
I don't-
more than 100%?
Right. I think you can. So sewering would be the only...
If 100% reduction is required, then you
So
need to collect treat, and discharge elsewhere.
So these could not be used in some areas in town that have a 100% reduction requirement?
I
Like
agree with
Meeting
that.
House Pond area or something?
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Maybe to clarify that a little bit, I think if you're talking about 100% reduction in an overall watershed,
Right.
that's, when you're talking about sub-watersheds, the way that they've been presented in some of the MEP reports, don't forget, that's only one of many different scenarios that can be done. So if a modeling exercise indicates that it's 100% in one watershed, 30% in another sub-water, or 100% in a sub-watershed, 30% in another sub-watershed, there does exist a potential that maybe you shift that allocation, maybe 80% in a sub-watershed and bumping it up to 50% in another one, may be able to make those adjustments. But those are the kinds of things that would have to be investigated and modeled.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's move on for now. We've got a lot to cover. Should we break?
Yes.
Okay. Let's take our 15-minute break now.
The
Sorry
coffee
about
comes
that.
through regardless.